I made enough money from that where I quit my job. And that's when I began the Trends Research Institute in 1980, always under the understanding that current events form future trends, but if I look at them, as you said going into the break, without looking at them the way I want them to be, the way I wish them or hope them to be, and just the way they are, and let the data speak for itself, then you can see a clear direction of where the future is heading. And you know, it's like going to a doctor. You get a diagnosis. You don't call the doctor an SOB if you don't like his economic or political diagnosis. You accept it for what it is and work from that parameter. And that's what we do. We see the trends the way they're laying out in front of us, where they're going to go, and then we work around that direction, not trying to redirect it in our minds so that we hope for something different.
Well, now, specifically, because we have limited time with you, I could talk to you for 10 hours. You've got so much information. Briefly, I know you don't like to brag, but no brag, just fact, as John Wayne would say. Break down some of the predictions and trends, the projections that you've made that have unfortunately come true. And I say unfortunately because your analysis is pretty much identical to mine and many other experts I'm interviewing about, on the good side, total depression, breakdown of society, police state. On the bad side, Road Warrior, Mad Max, 10,000 BC, just lawless third world bands of, I mean, that's what you're talking about now, and that's where all the trends are headed, and government is doing everything it can to accentuate that. So let's break down some of your track record and then get into what's happening currently and then into the future, sir.
Yeah, well, I guess my first big forecast came in 1980, actually it was January of 1980, 7, and I had predicted that there'd be a stock market crash that year, and the Wall Street Journal gave me credit for that one as well. From there, the next big one was with I had in my book Trend Tracking, as a matter of fact, I came out and said that there would be a new third party. This was in 1988, and for some reason I said that Ross Perot would be the type of candidate that would kind of head this kind of party. And in those days, nobody knew who Ross Perot was. From there, my other big forecast in the consumer end had to do with gourmet coffees, the organic foods, water in the early 80s, a big water trend, bottled water, a whole variety of natural healing trends. Matter of fact, one of the early books I worked on in 1986 was called Natural Healing. So I got a very good understanding of that field as well. And again, this is what really differentiates me from a lot of the other trend forecasters, in that I get involved in a lot of the fields where I see things going and understand them at a different level. So those are some of the things. Then, back going into the economic crisis, we had then forecast the 1990 recession, how long it would last, and the 1997 foreign currency crisis, the dot-com crash. In our Trends Journal, we said in October 1999 that by the second quarter of 2000, we would have the dot-com bubble would burst, then the ensuing recession, and then this past November 7th, we took out the domain name panicof08.com. And we knew that there would be the panic of 08, and we also said that there, in our top trends for 2008, which came out on December 17th, 2007, we said that there would be an economic 9/11.
And now we see that unfolding. What do you see breaking down the next 3 years? How do you see it unfolding? Now, again, folks, this is general. It can go from bad to worse. Or you can say the good, the bad, and the ugly. What is the best case scenario versus the worst case scenario? I mean, take that question any way you want. Those are just general thoughts I have.
Well, and let me back up too, because we're only human here, and we don't see everything, and we don't make all the calls properly. In the 1990s, for example, we underestimated in around 1993, 1994, the impact of the computer revolution and the technology boom. Now, any of us that remember back then, it was still in its infancy. And so, and they had that law. I forget the name of the law where things increase at an exponential rate in technology, far beyond what we had ever anticipated. So that's what's got us out of the 1990s recession, because we should have been in the shape we are in now back then, had it not been for that technological boom. Now,
but isn't it also, I understand for time we're oversimplifying, but also they changed the banking rules in 93, 95, 99 to allow intensified fractional reserve banking and leveraging, so that also helped the bubble along.
That helped the bubble along, and that created the big bubble that burst that we're in now, as you well know.
Yeah.
So, but just to give you the scenarios, yeah, we're saying we're going to go into a depression worse than the Great Depression, and here's why. And then I'm going to tell you why it cannot happen, or it may not happen.
Yeah, there is a way to get out of this.
There is a way to get out of it, but not through fiscal or monetary stimulus. If we have an alternative energy breakthrough beyond solar, wind, geothermal, biofuel that they like to talk about, whether it's something in cold fusion, zero-point energy, charged clusters, permanent magnets, hydrino power, something like that that's a productive enhancement that's as big as the discovery of fire or the invention of the wheel, then we get out of this economic mess.
A whole new market, a paradigm-shifting development. You're saying minus that, we're in deep trouble.
Minus that, we're going to go into the greatest depression, and here's why. Back when we had the last depression, most people didn't own homes. They didn't have all this burden that they're carrying now with taxes and everything else, insurance. Back then, people didn't have home equity loans. Matter of fact, we're probably both old enough to know when people had something called second mortgages, they were called losers. Back then, people didn't have credit cards. They weren't over $14 trillion in debt. Back then, the government had a trade surplus. We were not $700 billion in the hole.
And the people were self-sufficient.
And the people were self-sufficient. Back then, the government was not spending we're 11.5 trillion and growing in the hole with a budget deficit. Back then, we had budget surpluses. Oh. Back then, we weren't costing us over $2 trillion to fight wars. Back then, we had a manufacturing base that when the Depression finally did end with the onset of World War II, we were able to manufacture ourselves out of it, and then later on the rest of the world.
Gerald, stay there. Gerald Celente, trendsresearch.com is our guest. Stay with us. This is powerful info.